There's little I like more than being bored senseless by my own car-based nerdery. And if you're anything like some of my friends, I promise I do have some, then I'm sure you do too. So here are 8 nuggets of entirely useless automotive trivia. The Type 1 Volkswagen remains the most popular car ever built, and it's one of my favourites. I mean, who wouldn't like a car built on the whim of a ruthless dictator, but that came to stand for everything he despised? The Beetle was also a very simple car, but in many ways it was ingenious. Until the early 1980s, many affordable cars shunned electric washers in favour of a hand or foot-powered manual pump. But of course, the Beetle is rear-engined, so beside the front-mounted washer bottle is the spare tyre. The washers were therefore plumbed into the valve of the spare tyre, so when you push the switch, the pressure within pumped the fluid up to the windscreen. It's a good idea, until you get a puncture and there's no pressure in the spare because you've been trigger happy with the washers. Or alternatively, your punctured tyre placed in the boot means you'll have to do without washers. In the mid-1980s, Honda and Austin Rover were working on their first true collaboration, the pair of cars that became the Honda Legend and Rover 800. The cars were important for both firms, as Honda had never built a big saloon before, and Rover were a nationalised concern, replacing their decade-old SD1. It goes without saying that the press wanted a scoop, and where better to find an undisguised Rover 800 than in an Austin Rover plant. Nobody seems to know exactly who did this, whether it was a worker looking for a few quid or an enterprising photographer who snuck in undetected, but somebody was inside with a camera, and in order to clear the scene, they set off the fire alarms, waiting for the workforce to scarper before snapping a variety of cars in what I believe to be an abandoned section of the old Canley plant. People with too much time on their hands have known about this for years. I mean, look at the photographs. But a few years ago, a certain Sniff Petrol, Mr. Richard Porter, made this story much more well known, adding that the fire alarms caused the sprinklers to go off, soaking all the cars. Now sure, there's standing water in the photographs, but that's not unexpected in this kind of setting, and I cannot personally see any evidence of the cars themselves being soaked. Regardless, the photographs were sold to Car magazine and appeared on the front page of their October 1985 issue, almost a year before the car's launch, even if they incorrectly termed it the Rover 600 rather than 800. Alfa Romeo have often produced some truly beautiful family cars, and underrated in my view are the 147 and 156 from the early 2000s. But simultaneously, their GTA counterparts are two of the silliest cars ever produced. Whoever's idea it was to strap a 250 brake horsepower 3.2 litre V6 to the front of a family hatchback, while doing jack all to the manner in which it put the power down, deserves a medal. I mean, you need some serious help, but I love you. But the 156 GTA and 147 GTA were both launched in 2002, while the cars on which they're based made their debuts in 1997 and 2000 respectively. What I'm getting to is the fact that both cars were nearing their facelifts, the 156 receiving its in 2003, the 147 becoming chiselled in 2004. Yet in that process, neither GTA gained a facelift, so all the way through till the end of production, both Halo models retained their pre-facelift appearance. And to add insult to injury, the facelift tooling meant the GTA's lights and bumpers had to be fitted by hand. How's this for a 2-for-1? For 15 years between 1972 and 1987, if you wanted the ultimate engine layout in the refinement and practicality of a saloon car, then your only option was to buy a Jaguar XJ, complete with its 5.3 litre overhead cam V12. For all that time, nobody even considered challenging the XJ12 until the Bavarians came out of nowhere with the E32 BMW 750i. The 5-litre M70 was the first post-war German V12, producing 300 brake horsepower and, more importantly, total smoothness. But while nobody expected it, this announcement caused panic over in Stuttgart, where Mercedes-Benz were beavering away developing the W140 S-Class. Not once to be outdone, Daimler-Benz were already impressed with Jaguar's XJ40 and the E32 7 Series, but the fitment of 12 cylinders into the latter led them to delay the entire S-Class programme, which they'd already been working on for 6 years, from a proposed 1989 launch to the spring of 1991. When it finally did appear, the Mercedes-Benz 600 SE featured a 6-litre dual overhead camshaft, 400 brake horsepower M120 V12. This arms race between the Germans and the subsequent 90s recession undoubtedly put an end to the real engineering-led luxury saloons. But while it lasted, what an era of motorcars it was. When discussing the greatest cars that Britain has ever produced, our friend the Mini is never far away from our thoughts. And while its shape is ubiquitous, not many people know that the Mini was never the best-selling car in the country. At its launch in 1959, many people thought it weird, and though it became very popular indeed the following year, such a small car didn't have the selling power to top the charts at the end of the year. In 1962, BMC launched the Mini's big brother, the 1100, and for most of the rest of the decade, this was Britain's favourite car. Throughout the money-conscious 70s, the Mini did become British Leyland's most popular model, but the all-round bestseller was the Ford Cortina, and come 1980, Mini sales collapsed on the launch of the Austin Metro, never to recover. Izagonis's miniature masterpiece did remain on sale for a further 20 years, becoming the most popular British car of all time, but in a given year, it was never the UK's top seller. Between 1961 and 1992, a great many Renaults had a wheelbase that was longer on one side of the car than it was on the other. It sounds like a bit of a cock-up, but the engineering behind it is very sensible indeed. In developing the Renault 4, they were looking for a cheap and reliable system of suspension that offered good handling and outstanding comfort. They decided that it must be all independent, and the best solution was the torsion bar. Like many other cars, the 4's front suspension was by wishbones, whose pivots are longitudinal, meaning the bars ran down the length of the car under the floor. At the rear, however, the Renault 4 used trailing arms, which have a transverse pivot, so the torsion bars must instead be mounted across the car. In order to tune the suspension sufficiently, Renault wanted the bars to be as long as possible, but if that was the case, then the two sides would bump into each other. The solution was simply to offset the wheelbase, allowing each rear torsion bar to sit alongside its friend. Renault were not the first to do this, and as it was engineered correctly, was more than good enough to be carried over to many other models, most notably the original Renault 5. In 1966, Volvo introduced a new 3-digit numbering system to identify their cars, starting with the 100 series. The first digit signified the model, 100, 200, 300, etc. The second digit was the number of cylinders, a Volvo 140 featuring 4 cylinders, while a Volvo 160 had 6. The third digit stood for the number of doors, and therefore the body style. A Volvo 144, for example, was a 4-door saloon, while a 145 was a 5-door estate. Now that all makes sense, and it largely negates the need for any suffix. In 1974, this was carried forwards to the Volvo 200 series. This car, for example, being a 245, 200 series, 4-cylinder, 5-door, while this one is a 264, 200 series, 6-cylinder, 4-door. Again, a couple of years later, this is a Volvo 343, 300 series, 4-cylinder, 3-door. But it didn't last for too much longer. See, the 1.4-litre Renault engine in the Volvo 300 was augmented in 1981 by the Swedes' own 2-litre in what became the Volvo 360, but it still only had 4 cylinders. Volvo's efficient new naming system had therefore lasted 15 years before they corrupted it. A couple of years later, they abandoned the final digit, meaning all 4-pot 200s were now badged as simply Volvo 240s. But worse was to come in 1986, when a two-door coupe version of the 700 series was launched. Rather than being badged up like its saloon car counterparts, the coupe was termed the 780, despite lacking a nice big V8. The same thing happened again with the 400 series, where the hatchback became the 440 and saloon the 460. But to add insult to injury, the Volvo 940 and 960 were split merely by cost. Each version was available with 4 or 6 cylinder engines, and both could be had with 4 or 5 doors. And you thought the Swedes were sensible. The original BMW M3 remains today one of the most successful racing cars ever produced, painting a significant contrast against modern M Division cars. But as it was engineered specifically to go racing, the E30's boxy shape wasn't doing it any favours. A standard 3 Series had an aerodynamic drag coefficient of 0.38, effectively that of a small wardrobe. Compare that to the Ford Sierra's 0.34 and Mercedes 190's 0.33, and you begin to see the issue at a circuit like Hockenheim. The problem was the rear window shape, as the screen dropped down to meet the boot at a tremendously steep angle, and they couldn't simply cut up the car. Again, the past is a very different place. The solution, however, was very simple. The standard E30 body shell remained, but fitted to the rear end was an extension piece with a much shallower angle. Contained within was the standard saloon car's glass, and to make it all work, the boot lid was raised by 40mm. Combined with the box arches and deeper bumpers, BMW's M Division achieved a drag coefficient of 0.33, right on the money, allowing the car to win countless championships plus the Nürburgring 24 hours 5 times. If you've managed to make it through all that, then you very much deserve a medal. But as ever, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please do click like and subscribe to TwinCam as well. I'm forever indebted to my wonderful Patreon supporters, so if you would like to support me that way, then please do follow the link in the description, and I'll have more videos coming along soon.